Thank you. Am I on and working? Today's presentation is actually a joint presentation between someone from the university and someone from industry. So this is actually, university and industry actually working together on a project. Woohoo! And you'll see from the presentation that this is actually a very ad hoc working arrangement, just like in the real world where university and industry get together for the first time. They're going to work out what to do. We're going to do that on the fly because we actually haven't practiced this presentation together. So this is seeing university and industry interaction in progress. So I'm Dr. Gary Ellem and...
Nik Tysen from Varley Electric Vehicles.
Oh, smooth. Brilliant. So what we're going to talk about is a disruptive future of transport. You would have seen in Deb Hodgson's presentation that in the sort of size of industry versus sort of like amount of innovation happening, the one right down the bottom corner was actually transport. And so the question we're asking ourselves really is how can we think about some disruptive approaches to transport, and especially in the Hunter, how might we start to think about the Hunter as a major test bed for those sort of innovations? And so that's what we're going to go through today. What really today is all about is me. I'm actually a futurist, one of these people that Jeff talked about. So what happens when you take a futurist and match that with an innovator? So I get to think about the future and what it looks like, but that means nothing at all unless you have someone who can work out how to build that into products and services that deliver and change the world. That's Nik's job. No pressure.
Yeah, we've got to take those ideas and make them into a commercially viable project, implementing new ways of doing things and selling it to the masses.
So the talk today is going to be, I'm going to give you a bit of a vision from a futurist perspective about what the future of transport might look like, and then Nik will talk about how his company, the position it's already taken in the vehicles, in the transport sector, and where it might think it might head, given the kind of insights that are given to it by a futurist. That's the plan. Let's see how it works out. Rightio, so what does a futurist do? Jeff already talked about this. What we do is try and see into the future. There's kind of two kinds of futurists. There's one kind of futurist that tries to sort of predict what the future might look like, and the other one tries to look in the future and says, where are the opportunities that I might build? How might I actually influence the future by finding opportunities and helping people to work in that particular direction? Because the future's not set. There is agency. We have the ability to change the future if we can see opportunities and build those opportunities ourselves. So in the transport game, what's a futurist trying to do? Well, they're trying to grapple with two things. First of all is the world is changing. The world of the future will not be the same as the world today. What are those changes going to look like? What are those new and emerging pressures going to come on board? And also our capability, our ability to respond to those changes is changing as well. And just like Jeff said, a lot of those changes are not going to be in the transport sector itself. It's going to be in other sectors of the economy where new capability is being built and can be brought across into transport to create disruptive revolutions. So let's have a look at what those challenges look like. I've just picked a couple out. This is not a, don't treat this as a great thesis on the matter. This is just, what are some of the major sort of mega trends that are appearing? So one of those, of course, is oil. It turns out we're starting to get to the peak in production of conventional oil. That means there's been a step change in the oil price. The oil price has gone up by about 400% in the last 10 years. When you're wondering why petrol prices are increasing, it's because it's really hard to stick a straw in the ground and suck stuff out now. We have to do much more things. So oil price has had a substantial change. That's going to continue to increase. We're also more and more worried about pollution. That pollution might be from particulate matter, it might be from CO2 pollution, it might be noise pollution, it might be particulate pollution. All of those kind of pollution things are increasing, especially as you increase density of transport and you try and stack more and more people into a city using the same technologies. Something that's also challenging is infrastructure. If you want to move forward, and that says, step one is you need to, rebuild a completely new system. That's an enormous infrastructure investment. So infrastructure works two ways. There's, if you want to do a radical change that requires new infrastructure, you have to find the money to fund that infrastructure. But also, we've already spent an enormous amount of money on infrastructure. And for transport, the key value of transport is that transport actually sets the value of your home. So in fact, there's a big infrastructure investment that's already happening in transport, but that's the infrastructure investment in your house. And so connecting your house to the transport network is really the key value of that system. So because we've already built these communities in Australia, very car-dependent communities like the suburbs, we've already had all that infrastructure investment. Unless your future vision of transport is compatible with the suburb, you aren't recognising that value when you're trying to head somewhere else in terms of infrastructure investment. The last thing is population. Australia actually has one of the fastest population growth rates in the OECD. and also population is growing in other parts of the world. So we're trying to stack more and more people into smaller amounts of places, and as those new populations come up their development curve, they want more and more transport. Turns out that transport is a great enabler of prosperity and a result of prosperity. More transport lets you be more prosperous. When you're prosperous, you tend to want to have more transport. So it's a self-fulfilling cycle. So as we build more people and those people become more prosperous, we're all going to want to travel more and more and more and more. So those are the things that are changing on the emerging side. So that means that, funnily enough, transport is actually in a bit of trouble at the moment. Congestion is building up, cost the New South Wales economy about $5 billion a year. Really don't want to know what to do about that. Pollution is an issue. We don't know how to do the energy costs. We're currently importing in Australia about $37 billion a year worth of oil to run our transport system. That's the entire size of the entire coal export sector. We're exporting all of our coal to import the oil and getting nowhere. So that's something we have to fix. What's coming along? Well, there's a few emerging revolutions. One of those revolutions is in battery and energy storage technologies. Batteries, we'll talk a little bit about this later in part of Nik's talk. Batteries are undergoing a major revolution in terms of both energy density, power density and cost. All of those things are improving and improving remarkably. Batteries are coming down their cost curve. They've reduced by about a factor of 4 in the last 5 years, screaming down their cost curve. That changes everything. There's also autonomy. That's actually a picture in the top right there. That's a picture of the Google autonomous car. Those cars have currently done about 1 million kilometres of testing on road. So this is not like, on our little test track. We've already driven about 1 million kilometres on the road in traffic. It's only had 2 accidents so far. Both of those was when the autonomous system was turned off and there was a person driving. Okay? Interesting. Every major automotive manufacturer on the planet has an autonomous vehicle program. Parts of that is already filtering into the car you can buy. Why? Because the biggest safety risk in the car is the idiot behind the wheel. 85% of accidents we know are the cause of the driver. It is the highest risk in the vehicle at this point in time. So they're bringing in autonomy because they see this is the obvious road to increase safety, and the auto industry has always been interested in safety. Something you might hear about a little bit later on is the Internet of Things. So we've got big data, things are connected, we have lots of information travelling around the system, and that's actually changing the way we think about things. And the last one is there's actually a really big revolution happening in collaboration at the moment. So that's collaboration on both ends, both in terms of actually being able to collaborate to innovate. Communication and collaboration is a really strong basis to innovation. The other thing that people are collaborating on is they're starting to think about what we call collaborative consumption. And collaborative consumption is a big breakthrough when you have high capital items that don't have much use. If you share those capital items, so things that are expensive, take your private passenger car, for example. You buy that private passenger car, you pay for it twice, you pay for it once in the capital cost, you pay for it a second time of insurance, and what do? Use it 5% of the time, and for 95% of the time it costs you money. You have to park it somewhere that takes up space. Collaborative consumption says, what if we took that lowly used piece and we work out how people can share it and we can get better capital effectiveness? We don't need as many cars to service the same job. So those are some things that are coming on. So if you get all of those things and mash them together, how might you think the future of transport might look? Well, let's break this up into a few different things. One of those is something that's going to continue, and that's the need for industrial scale transport. So this is either mass transit of people, or this is going to be mass transit of goods and services. Those things have always been co-used, so the duty cycle, the amount that they're used for, those vehicles don't have a lot of downtime. They're always being used fairly hard. That's probably not going to change in terms of the ownership model, but what is going to change is the energy source. It turns out that the more you use a vehicle, the more diesel or petrol you would have used, and it's that saving you use in going to battery that actually pays for the cost of the battery. So the economics for batterification of those actually works much, much better. And so you can see that what we think will come online is things like we can have a battery bus network that's in line. There's work that's already been going on to actually electrify road freight. That's working. Things like other mass transit like trains and trams and those sort of things, you can remove the cost of putting in the overhead wires if you put a battery on the vehicle itself. And so that's a large reduction in infrastructure costs to be able to run that happen. So we think there's a trend, going to be a trend for the electrification and batterification of mass transport. All of that connectivity, though, and the autonomy gives us a fundamentally new way to think about personal transport. So most of us own a car because we like to have personalised transport. We like to have, when we want to go somewhere, we want to go when we want to go, at the time we want to go. We don't want to think about it, we just want to get in and go. What autonomy lets you do is says, well, I can provide you that now as a service. I can get you your phone and say, I want to go there. The machine will turn up to your door, pick you up, take you where you want to go, when you want to go, and drop you off, and it'll do that at the cost of a bus fare. Why will it do that? Because you no longer have to pay for the driver. And the driver is one of the major costs in a taxi system. So what that says is that there's going to be lots of different kind of scale vehicles in that. You'll have small individual scales. Most of our trips are a single person in the vehicle, so you'll have a single person sort of scale vehicle that'll take you somewhere, and you'll have slightly bigger ones for bigger trips. Don't think that that's going to dominate the entire personal transit sector, of course, because if you want to have rapid transit in longer distances or you're dealing with much higher volumes, then it's actually mass transit is the only one that can deliver that option. So what you're going to have is a mass transit backbone serviced at the back end by a shared form of transport, and that will mean you don't have to own a private passenger car. So for the 85% of trips that are done by the private passenger car, a lot of that will get shifted over into this collaborative consumption autonomous electric vehicle system. Whew, that sounds good. Right. What's the last thing? Well, it turns out that people still like to own stuff, and there are some things you still might want to own yourself. So those things will be either things that are quite cheap, so that'll be things like shoes, the ultimate transport system, nice and personalised, things like bicycles. That picture you got of the person on the skateboard, that's actually an electric skateboard. Currently illegal on New South Wales footpaths. If we can overcome some of those little regulatory hurdles, then that's an awesome form of personal transport which interacts really well with mass transit and other things. The new battery technology allows you to miniaturise that, so that, that skateboard will go for 20 kilometres and about 10 kilometres an hour with little remote control, off you go. Really good stuff. So that technology is available now. Probably we'll also want to still own things like, just because we don't actually use the horses transport anymore, it doesn't mean that people still don't like to own horses for other purposes, for recreational, for sharing, those sort of things. And so the kind of fun end of the automotive sector, people still want to have sports cars, people still want to ride sports bikes because they're fun. And they'll probably want to own those things themselves as a status symbol and as an investment. So that's sort of a bit of a vision about where we think transport might be heading. Bulk of transport will shift into this shared electric, which will be a combination of small-scale autonomous vehicles and mass transit. The industrial stuff will probably head towards electric to try and relieve pressure on the fuel supply, and we'll still want to own stuff. Hopefully that stuff we want to own will either be small and personalised, or it'll be, for people with money who want to flash stuff around, it'll be stuff that's fun and exciting. I'm going to hand over to Nik to see where Varley is in the middle of the transport system and where it might want to head from here.
So I guess Varley Electric Vehicles, we were part of the bigger Varley group. Started back in 2006, looking at ways how we can enter into new markets with new products. Starting very basic with industrial products, like on the bottom there with the little white truck, predominantly servicing airports and warehouses and anywhere really that you need to move materials. Started off very, very low tech, so kind of lead-acid batteries and DC motors. And over time, we realised that to remain competitive, we have to innovate. So that's kind of evolving that product now. So that now is an AC motors, so more efficient, and AGM batteries, so they're totally maintenance-free. Off the back of that, we realised that now there are more and more people getting involved in that space, and in order to survive and stay ahead of the game, we need to look at different technologies and new products which are bigger and better. So on that front, we're kind of looking at bigger people transport. So the picture on the bottom right there is our own custom-made electric bus designed to go into like a zoo or transport people silently through a rainforest. And one of our big focuses right now, which kind of relates back to where Gary left off, is mass transit. So the electric bus in the top left-hand corner is currently a concept that we're working on with various transport providers to work out whether there's a market for electric buses right now or whether that's something that's still coming. And then we've got our R&D projects, which are like the motorbike and the yellow car. Most people know the yellow car. And these are about keeping ahead of the game and understanding new technologies and actually actively using them. So Varley's taken an approach of investment in technology to make sure we stay ahead of the game. Two companies we've invested in is Ultramotive and Tritium. Both of these companies started in solar car racing. The Ultramotive motor is a highly efficient powertrain, 97% efficiency. and is matched with the tritium power electronics. Both of these were originally designed to power solar cars across the desert with very limited power supply. We now see a future in those two products where we can integrate them into new electric vehicles, giving us a technological advantage over the competition. There's also areas which we clearly can't invest in, but we have very strong partnerships with, and that's energy storage, so batteries. As Gary mentioned, batteries are kind of developing at a very fast rate. One of those technologies is really lithium titanate. So we've linked in with, for example, Toshiba and some concepts around instant charge electric buses, where the batteries are capable of being charged to 80% capacity within 6 minutes. And that really does change the gameplay a little bit for electric vehicles. So we're looking at implementing some of those technologies in some of the future projects that Gary's been talking about. So we're kind of keeping our core business going with the industrial vehicles and looking how we can use the technologies we've invested in and integrate them into future products like autonomous transport.
So just to give you a bit of an idea of what those kind of things are, mentioned that particular battery technology that could charge really, really fast, that also cycles very, very well. So we've just come back from Adelaide, where we presented a paper at the Australasian Rail Conference down there. And in that presentation, we presented a set of calculations which says it's now doable to produce a battery electric train for the Hunter Rail network, which means we can electrify the Hunter Rail network without having the capital cost up front of actually putting in the overhead wires. In this particular configuration, what we can do is stack all of the battery required for the train into a single locomotive and reuse 2 of the existing diesel locomotives, because the diesel locomotives actually have a diesel engine and electric motors in the wheels. You actually don't have to turn on the diesel motors. So you can still reuse those 2 existing diesel locomotives, stack all the stuff, build these new battery locomotives, and for that you would only have to charge them at the charge and discharge points in the network where they load the coal and they unload the coal. You charge them at both ends, and there's 1 or 2 key hills in the middle of the network where you don't have to electrify a few kilometres of network, maybe less than 10 kilometres of overhead wires will be enough to electrify the whole of the Hunter Rail corridor. To do that, the thing you need to do is to work out how to build this battery electric locomotive. We've done all the sums that says we think that's doable in terms of just scale and size. And you have to think about how you develop the charging network that supports that. So there's some it's now the job for some engineers to come in. We think, we've done the back of the envelope calculations that this is now doable given the technology that's available. Now we have to work out the mechanisms of how those power electronics work and what would you build and how would you innovate. The second thing we're interested really is development of an autonomous shuttle bus. So Varley already produces these small sort of electric shuttle bus vehicles. How do we match that with autonomous technologies to develop a testbed autonomous shuttle bus? We think the university campus is a fantastic place to test that technology. We have a train station which is 20 minutes from the other side of the campus. Under controlled conditions, it's a perfect environment to get a little bit of a finger in the pie of this game and see how that works. So that's where we think we might be heading. It sounds like a fun time. And what does that mean? Well, that means that a bigger sort of scenario, what we're actually saying is we need to build a transport innovation testbed. Australia needs this. We are currently importing $37 billion worth of oil a year and $30 billion worth of cars. This is the single greatest structural hole in the nation's economy. 20% of goods imports into the country are importing goods and vehicles to run our transport system. We no longer make cars. Our oil production is collapsing. As a strategic move, you would think that this would be a major source that the nation would want to invest in. Why not the Hunter as the ideal testbed to make this sort of stuff happen? That's our pitch to you. Let's see if we can make this work. Cheers.